Ukraine was always part of Russia. Anyone who supports Ukraine's independence or opposes Russia's military actions is a traitor.
Recently, in a small town in China, a heated argument broke out between an elderly scrap collector and a street vendor selling fried pancakes. The dispute centered around differing opinions on the Russia-Ukraine war. The elderly man, who strongly supported Russia, was particularly vocal, emphasizing his belief that Ukraine and Russia were historically one. His strong stance reflected sentiments often seen in Chinese nationalist rhetoric, which aligns with pro-Russia narratives. Since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, public opinion in China has been divided between those who support Russia and those who support Ukraine. These two groups hold opposing views, and their debates have continued for the past 3 years, mirroring the duration of the conflict in Eastern Europe. Discussions on the topic have not been limited to online forums, but have also taken place in public spaces such as markets, village streets, and other community settings. Due to China's state-controlled media and political positioning, pro-Russia voices tend to be more dominant. Recently, however, pro-Russia supporters in China have faced challenges. U.S. President Donald Trump has stated his intention to broker an end to the war and initiated discussions with Russia. Speculation has also emerged that after a ceasefire, the U.S. may seek closer ties with Russia to counterbalance China. Additionally, recent economic measures taken by Russia, such as imposing higher tariffs and restricting Chinese imports, have raised concerns about the stability of China-Russia relations. These developments have created uncertainty for those in China who strongly supported Russia, as potential shifts in geopolitical alignments could complicate their stance. Trump's proposal for a Russia-Ukraine ceasefire has already unsettled Beijing, which has quietly supported prolonging the conflict. Adding to the complexity, Russia's latest actions appear to diverge from China's interests. If Washington and Moscow were to strengthen ties and shift focus toward countering China, the geopolitical landscape could see a significant shift. These developments have also placed pro-Russia supporters in China in an increasingly difficult position. Continued support for Russia now carries the implication of backing a country that is engaging in dialogue with the United States, a contradiction for those who have long positioned themselves as strongly anti-American. Many of these supporters have frequently criticized the U.S. as a persistent threat to China. Now, with shifting alliances, maintaining that stance has become more challenging. Meanwhile, pro-Ukraine supporters in China have reacted differently, taking the opportunity to openly mock their pro-Russia counterparts.
China and Russia's cooperation was supposed to have no limits. Every day, pro-Russia supporters praise Putin and his country, but now Russia is reconciling with the US and preparing for negotiations. So what now? Who will you support? Their sudden shift in stance, did it catch you off guard? Say something. If you support Russia so much, why don't you go there? Now that Russia and the US are getting along, who's in the awkward position? There's a saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Now that they've become friends, who is the enemy? Who will they target next? Think carefully about this. Are you still going to support Russia? This reminds me of something I saw during the Lunar New Year when I visited the countryside. A family had a guard dog barking furiously at us as we passed by, but the owner just smiled and greeted us warmly. Then the owner went back, picked up a stick, and stopped the dog from barking. After that, the dog fell silent. It was awkward. Really awkward. Just like what's happening now. Who will you support next? Are you going to change direction? It's like suddenly slamming on the brakes in the middle of the road. You were always talking about taking the lead, overtaking others at sharp turns. But now, with this sudden stop, what are you going to do?
One commentator in a widely shared video noted Russia's apparent shift toward the West. He also mocked Russian supporters by claiming that they are the 20 million bachelors in China who can't find a wife.
Will
there still be pro-Russia supporters in the future? My answer is probably not, though there may be a few who refuse to change their stance. At this point, Russia has largely shifted toward the West and is preparing for joint military exercises with NATO. This means that China-Russia relations will need to be redefined. If Russia aligns with the US, they effectively become partners. So if any pro-Russia supporters stubbornly continue to cheer for Russia, chanting slogans and expressing admiration, wouldn't that essentially make them pro-America as well? And wouldn't that mean they are supporting the very side they once opposed?
The commentator further analyzed the future of Russia-China relations, suggesting that a return to the previous level of partnership is unlikely. However, he also noted that a complete breakdown in ties is improbable, as both sides would prefer to maintain a stable relationship. He pointed out that China cannot afford to be at odds with both the US and Russia simultaneously. However, the balance of power lies with Washington and Moscow. If they decide to take a tougher stance against China, Beijing would have little choice but to respond accordingly. He also predicted that the global order is headed for a major restructuring, with Western alliances undergoing adjustments. In this scenario, Europe would likely become a key region for China to strengthen diplomatic efforts. The commentator's perspective aligns closely with recent messaging from Chinese state media. Beijing has been emphasizing its strategic partnership with Ukraine while also criticizing Trump's approach to European affairs. Though officially neutral, China appears to be positioning itself to take advantage of any shifts in global alliances. As for his claim that 20 million single men who can't find a wife are pro-Russia supporters, he cited patterns observed in online discussions and public sentiment. AI-generated profiles of pro-Russia and pro-Ukraine supporters reveal notable differences. Demographically, pro-Russia supporters tend to be older, mostly in their 50s and 60s. Many grew up under the influence of the Soviet Union, which has shaped their worldview. Meanwhile, pro-Ukraine supporters are generally younger, with more independent perspectives. In terms of education and profession, pro-Russia supporters are more likely to have lower levels of education and come from rural or working-class backgrounds. Many rely on state media and nationalist online influencers for information, which can limit their exposure to diverse viewpoints. This also reflects China's broader media environment, where narratives favorable to Russia are more widely promoted. A content creator in a widely shared video commented on this dynamic.
In China's online space, if you want to gain followers, it's best to be pro-Russia. There's a large audience for it, and they don't question the authenticity of the information. As long as you say "Ura" and praise Russia, you'll attract plenty of supporters. On the other hand, those who are pro-Ukraine tend to be more rational and objective. But that makes it harder to build a following. Many internet users still prefer Russia over Ukraine. Some even admire Russia's military history, recalling past conflicts where China was forced to recede territory and make concessions. This fear and admiration have led some to see Russia almost as a protective figure. That's why, if you want to discuss current affairs online, being pro-Russia is the safer route.
In contrast, pro-Ukraine supporters tend to have higher levels of education and are professionals or white-collar workers. Although there's no clear geographical divide, video content produced by pro-Russia supporters often features rural settings, such as brick houses, farmland, and livestock enclosures. This suggests that pro-Russia sentiment may be more prevalent in rural areas, where many unmarried men reside. The claim that 20 million single men are pro-Russia supporters appears to stem from this observation, as China's rural areas do have a large population of unmarried men. However, these profiles reflect the information landscape within China, where speech is restricted and viewpoints are shaped by state narratives. They do not necessarily represent how pro-Russia and pro-Ukraine sentiments manifest internationally. Additionally, they account for only a segment of the Chinese population, as the majority remain silent, either unwilling or unable to openly express their views. Some individuals choose to stay neutral, not out of independent thinking, but due to a lack of personal conviction shaped by long-term exposure to state narratives. As one online commenter put it doesn't matter which side you support, as long as you align with the national stance. A content creator known as Bo expressed an extreme viewpoint in a widely shared video.
It doesn't matter whether you support Russia or Ukraine. As long as they keep fighting, they are both worth supporting. My position is simple. I support whoever is attacking, whether it's Russia attacking Ukraine or Ukraine attacking Russia. I side with the aggressor. The reason is straightforward. Those who die are Slavs, and China is not involved. Since we are just spectators, why not support the fight?
This perspective not only lacks basic humanitarian concern, but also reflects a disregard for human life and a purely self-serving mindset, highlights an attitude of detachment and indifference. Since taking office over a month ago, Donald Trump has taken significant steps to mediate the Russia-Ukraine conflict, leading to widespread repercussions. His administration's decisions have had far-reaching effects on the battlefield and beyond. Following a contentious public meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Trump paused funding to Ukraine. A key setback for Ukraine has been the sudden failure of the US-supplied HIMARS rocket system, which relies on American intelligence data to target Russian positions beyond 30 kilometers from the front line. HIMARS has been a critical asset for Ukraine in striking Russian military targets, particularly as Ukrainian forces were making gains in key areas of Donetsk. Without access to targeting data, the system has effectively been rendered inoperable. Similarly, the British-supplied Storm Shadow long-range missiles, which have been used to strike Russian positions in Crimea and Kursk, are now ineffective due to the loss of American intelligence support. Without real-time targeting data, these weapons have become unusable. In response, French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu has confirmed that France is now providing intelligence support to Ukraine. However, it remains uncertain whether French intelligence capabilities can match the precision of US data or integrate seamlessly with American-made weapon systems. Nonetheless, this assistance offers Ukraine an alternative to prevent a complete battlefield blackout. Initially, Trump's pressure campaign aimed to bring Zelensky back to the negotiating table. However, recent reports suggest his approach may be evolving. Trump now appears to be seeking a change in Ukraine's leadership rather than negotiating directly with Zelensky. According to Politico, at least 4 senior Trump advisors have been in discussions with Zelensky's key political rivals. These include leaders from the parties of former Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko and former President Petro Poroshenko. The primary topic of discussion has been the possibility of holding an expedited presidential election to replace Zelensky. The accuracy of these reports has been confirmed by individuals involved in the talks, indicating that Trump's Ukrainian strategy may now be shifting towards facilitating a change in leadership. Trump has also intensified economic pressure on Ukraine. According to a Bloomberg exclusive, his administration is now tying a U.S.-Ukraine mineral resources agreement to Ukraine's willingness to pursue a ceasefire with Russia. The agreement, which was initially close to being finalized, has been stalled due to Trump's condition that Ukraine must commit to a viable ceasefire plan. This aligns with Trump's broader vision of negotiating a bigger and better deal, placing additional pressure on Zelensky's administration to engage in peace talks. As these developments unfold, the direction of U.S. policy on Ukraine appears to be shifting, with potential implications for both the war and the broader geopolitical landscape. At the same time, Reuters reported that the Trump administration is considering revoking the legal status of approximately 240,000 Ukrainians who fled to the U.S. during the war and sending them back. These individuals were granted entry under the Biden administration's humanitarian parole program, and the potential policy shift has sparked widespread controversy. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt denied the report, calling it fake news, but also stated that no final decision has been made. Her wording left room for speculation, suggesting that Trump may still be weighing his options. Meanwhile, Trump has been applying pressure on Russia as well. On March 7th, he posted on Truth Social, warning Russia that he is seriously considering imposing large-scale banking sanctions, and tariffs, unless a ceasefire and a final peace agreement are reached. He urged both sides to negotiate while there is still time. That same day, Bloomberg cited sources in Moscow indicating that Russia is open to discussing a temporary ceasefire with Ukraine, provided there is progress toward a final solution. Anonymously sourced reports suggest that this is the first sign of a positive response from Russian President Vladimir Putin to Trump's call for negotiations. Russian and American officials reportedly conveyed this proposal during high-level talks in Saudi Arabia last month. At the same time, China has started to intervene. On March 5th, French President Emmanuel Macron delivered a national address emphasizing Europe's need for strategic autonomy, stating that Europe's future cannot be decided by Washington and Moscow. China quickly seized the opportunity. During the annual Two Sessions political meetings in Beijing, China's Special Envoy for European Affairs, Liu Xiaoye, echoed Macron's remarks, asserting that the Ukraine peace process should not be dictated solely by the US and Russia. He accused Washington of favoring Moscow while attempting to sway European nations. Liu further stated that America's treatment of its allies should serve as a warning to Europe and urged a reassessment of European policies toward China. China's embassy in the U.S. also issued a strong response, declaring that it is prepared to fight to the end in any tariff war, trade war, or any other form of economic confrontation. This marks a shift from China's previous stance as a passive observer of the Russia-Ukraine conflict to a more active participant, aiming to exploit negotiations to create divisions between the U.S. and Europe. Beijing's approach appears to be focused on keeping Russia economically dependent while weakening the U.S.-European alliance. In addition, China has extended new diplomatic overtures to Ukraine. On March 6, Chinese ambassador to Ukraine, Ma Shenkun, signed an agreement with Kiev to facilitate the export of peas and seafood to China. Ukrainian officials stated that they intend to expand trade with China as soon as possible. Chinese state media widely covered the deal, marking a stark contrast to earlier narratives that were more critical of Ukraine. Given that China previously shifted its agricultural imports from Ukraine to Russia after the war began, this renewed engagement with Ukraine appears to be a strategic move. Ambassador Ma described the agreement as a step toward enhancing the China-Ukraine strategic partnership, reinforcing a position that aligns with Foreign Minister Wang Yi's recent remarks at the Munich Security Conference in February. Overall, the situation reflects a shifting geopolitical landscape. The U.S. is exploring cooperation with Russia as a counterweight to China, while Beijing is attempting to strengthen ties with Europe to undermine the U.S.-European alliance. The outcome of Russia-Ukraine negotiations will depend on whether Trump escalates pressure on Putin and the extent of China's involvement in the process. This ongoing realignment remains fluid, with its full implications yet to unfold. Domestically, China's media landscape has also seen notable shifts. Once dominated by pro-Russia and anti-Ukraine narratives, China's state messaging has begun emphasizing cooperation with Ukraine. This change has caught many online observers by surprise, with some commenting, "This shift in tone happened so quickly. Previously, content critical of Russia or supportive of Ukraine was swiftly removed, but now such discussions remain online for longer, suggesting an adjustment in China's official stance." For pro-Russia supporters in China, these developments have created a dilemma. Many have long been vocal in their support for Russia, frequently praising its actions online. However, with Russia now engaging diplomatically with the U.S. and even potentially aligning against China, their stance has become increasingly difficult to maintain. If they continue supporting Russia, they risk indirectly supporting U.S. interests, a contradiction given their strong anti-American sentiments. Many now find themselves at a crossroads, struggling to reconcile their previous positions with the evolving geopolitical reality. This situation underscores the challenges of following China's shifting political narratives. As Beijing recalibrates its foreign policy, domestic supporters of its earlier positions are left navigating an increasingly complex landscape, where ideological consistency becomes a test of adaptability.